The stock market just hit another record high, and it has never mattered less to the person watching it. Barron saw the headline on his phone this morning: S&P 500 closes at a record, right above a text from his landlord raising the rent. He flipped the phone face down and finished his cereal. 3 floors up, same building, Nikki saw the same headline. She didn't flip her phone over. She watched a number in her brokerage app tick up by more than Barron makes in a year, sipped her coffee, and got on with her morning. Same city, same building, same words on the same screen, 2 completely different planets. My name is Nick, and today we're answering the question quietly driving everyone insane. If the world is so obviously on fire, if everything costs more and nobody can buy a house, then why does the stock market keep throwing a party like nothing's wrong? This isn't a story about the market being wrong, it's about what that scoreboard is actually measuring, and why it was never measuring you. So here's the first thing you have to understand, and it's the thing almost nobody says out loud. The stock market is not the economy. I know you've heard that phrase before, tossed around by people on TV who then immediately fail to explain what it means, so let me actually explain it. Think of the stock market as a giant scoreboard hanging over a stadium. Your instinct, a completely reasonable instinct, is to assume that scoreboard is measuring how the whole crowd is doing. It isn't. It's measuring how a very small number of players down on the field are doing. You're in the stands, most of us are in the stands. And that scoreboard lighting up green doesn't mean your seat got any more comfortable or your beer got any cheaper. It just means the players you paid to watch are having a fantastic night. Once you actually internalize that one image, the paradox stops being a paradox and starts being kind of obvious. Because here's the second layer, and it's a big one. The stock market doesn't care about right now. It never has. The economy, jobs, wages, the price of eggs, whether your rent went up again, that's a measure of what's happening today. The stock market is a bet on what a handful of enormous companies will earn years from now. It's not a thermometer, it's a fortune teller. And a pretty overconfident one. So when you feel broke today and the market rips to a new high on the very same day, those two things aren't even describing the same time period. You're describing your Tuesday. The market is pricing in 2030. And here's the kicker, it's not even pricing in your 2030. Roughly 28% of the revenue that the companies in the S&P 500 bring in doesn't even come from the United States. It comes from overseas. For the big technology companies specifically, it's more than half. So take that board you keep anxiously glancing at, the one you assume reflects your town, your job, your local grocery store. A huge chunk of it isn't measuring any of that. It's measuring how well Apple sells phones in Europe and how many chips get shipped to data centers on the other side of the planet. Your struggling Tuesday and a booming S&P 500 were never a contradiction. They were never even on the same map. And if you want proof that the market and your actual life can just wander off in totally different directions, look at history. In early 2020, during the worst of the pandemic, unemployment exploded to levels not seen since the Great Depression. People were genuinely terrified. And the stock market? It crashed for about a month, then turned around and sprinted to brand new record highs while millions of people were still out of work. Record highs and unemployment lines holding hands at the exact same time. It has happened before, and it'll happen again because the two things were never the same measurement. Now, if I told you the market's at a record high, you'd probably picture all 500 companies rising together, a rising tide lifting every boat. Yeah, that's not what's happening either. Let me show you where the party is actually being held, because it's a much smaller room than you think. There's a group of companies people have started calling the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, which is Facebook, and Tesla. 7 companies out of 500. And right now, those 7 names alone make up around 32% of the entire index. Let that sit for a second. 7 names out of 500 are basically a third of the whole thing. Now widen it to the 10 biggest companies, and you're looking at over 40% of the index riding on just 10 stocks. The last time concentration was even close to this extreme was the dot-com bubble back in the year 2000, and we have now sailed well past that mark. So, what does that actually do to you? It means the S&P 500 is basically wearing a costume. It's dressed up as 500 diversified American companies, but underneath it behaves like about 10 enormous, very similar technology stocks holding hands. And in 2025, one single company, Nvidia, was responsible for roughly 15% of the entire index's gain for the whole year. One company out of 500 drove about a sixth of everybody's returns. Here's the part that should genuinely change how you look at your own account. Say you put $10,000 into a normal S&P 500 index fund, the exact thing every finance person, including me, tells you to buy. You think you just bought 500 companies, nicely spread out. What you actually did was put around $3,200 into just those 7 giants, and then sprinkled the remaining 6,800 across the other 493. And by the time you get down to the medium-sized companies in that index, you own, and I mean this literally, a few dollars of each. The 500th company gets pennies. Actual pennies. You didn't buy a diversified basket of 500 businesses. You bought 7 big bets wearing a trench coat with the word diversification scribbled on it. Okay, so the board measures the future, it measures global giants, and it's really measuring only about 10 of them. But we still haven't cracked the part that actually explains why Barron feels absolutely nothing and Nikki got richer just by reading a headline. This is the one that matters most, so stay with me here. Ask yourself a stupidly simple question. When the market hits a record high, who actually collects the money? Because a record high isn't free cash raining down on the whole country. I know the headlines make it sound like a piñata just burst open over America. It didn't. It's the value of stocks going up, which means it only helps you if you own the stocks in the first place. And here's the fact that quietly explains almost everything you're feeling. The wealthiest 1% of American households own about half of all the stock in the entire country. The top 1% alone own more stock than the bottom 90% of the country combined. Widen it out to the top 10% of households, and they own somewhere around 90% of all the stock that exists, which leaves the bottom half of the country, half of all the people, owning roughly 1% of the stock market between all of them. So when that headline screams record high and the anchor on TV sounds all excited about it, understand what's really happening. Those gains are landing almost entirely in accounts that already belong to people who were already wealthy. It's not that the party locks you out on purpose, it's that the party is happening inside houses you were never given the keys to. And before someone types, "But Nick, I have a 401k," yes, a lot of people own a little bit. But watch the gap between a little and a lot. The typical American with a retirement account has around $44,000 in it. That's the median, the person standing right in the middle, and it's the honest number, not the average that a few giant accounts drag way up. So when the market has a monster year and jumps 20%, that middle of the pack person gains, on paper, maybe $8,000 or $9,000. Real money, genuinely, but it doesn't buy a house and it doesn't fix a bad month. Meanwhile, a household sitting on $2 million in stocks gains $400,000 in the exact same 20% move. Same market, same day, same percentage. One person got a mildly nice number on a screen, the other person just out-earned a full decade of the first person's salary without lifting a single finger. That right there is Nikki and Barron. That was always Nikki and Barron. So now you might be thinking, okay, fine, the rich own most of it, but why does it keep going up, especially when things feel this bad? Shouldn't all the fear and the gloom make it fall? You'd think so, but the market has a couple of engines bolted onto it that shove it higher almost automatically, and once you see them, you genuinely can't unsee them. The first engine is you. Well, your paycheck. Every 2 weeks, tens of millions of people have money pulled automatically out of their paychecks and dumped straight into index funds inside their 401k. And that money buys stocks no matter what the price is. Nobody's checking whether the market's expensive, nobody's reading the news first and deciding to hold off. It's a buyer that shows up every single payday, cash in hand, with exactly zero opinions. Index funds now hold more than half of all the money in American funds. That is a mountain of automatic price blind buying that just never stops. It's like a Roomba that only knows how to buy stocks. The building could be actively on fire and it'd still be quietly bumping into the walls, buying more. And here's the quietly maddening part, that autopilot doesn't care that Barron is behind on his bills. It'll pull your $40 this Friday whether you thought about the market for even 1 second, same as it pulls Nikki's. The catch is that Nikki already has 100 times more riding on it. So the same rising tide lifts her yacht and Barron's dinghy by very, very different amounts. The second engine is companies buying back their own stock. In the last year alone, the companies in the S&P 500 spent over $1 trillion, a record, buying back their own shares. And when a company buys its own stock off the market, there are suddenly fewer slices of the pie left, so each remaining slice is worth a little more, and the price drifts up. It's a company voting for itself with its own wallet. So between the payday autopilot and $1 trillion of buybacks, you've got this relentless, almost mechanical upward pressure that has very little to do with whether regular people are actually doing okay. There used to be a third reason too, this idea people called TINA, there is no alternative. For over a decade, interest rates were basically zero, so savings accounts and bonds paid you nothing, which meant there was nowhere to put your money except stocks. Money flooded in because it had nowhere else to go. That excuse is mostly dead now since bonds actually pay something again. And yet the money mostly stayed in stocks anyway out of pure habit and momentum, which tells you something a little unsettling. At this point, the machine keeps buying, not always because it's a great deal, but because it's built to keep buying. And that right there is the whole engine of the frustration, isn't it? Because at the exact same time, all this money is automatically shoving the scoreboard higher.